The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to our webinar that one of our longest partners, Datto, is helping us put on. So my name is Kevin Blake. I'm the president and CEO of ICS. We are a managed service provider headquartered in Endicott, New York, with offices in Ithaca and Syracuse. And I was hoping to announce that we have a new office, but we're about a week from closing on another acquisition. It'll take us into a new territory. So we've been in business for 25 years, have roughly 100 employees, and we're a true partner to our customers. Our why we exist is to make a difference in our employees' lives, our customers' businesses, and the communities we serve and live in. So we are very intentional about doing that. We get really involved in nonprofit and activities inside the communities we're in. So I'm happy to be here today introducing Datto, and I'm thankful that you took some time out to hear what we have to say. So I want to turn it over to Michael DePalma from Datto, who can take it from here. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Kevin. So my name is Mike DePalma. I'm the Senior Channel Development Manager at Datto. So we are a backup disaster recovery company based out of Norwalk, Connecticut, so about 40 miles east of Manhattan. My job normally takes me around the world 3-4 days a week doing live presentations, sitting on seminars and panels and things like that. I've obviously been grounded now for the last 8 months, but continue to do these virtual presentations. I've been fortunate to sit alongside some folks from some different governmental agencies, FBI, Department of Homeland Security. And so a lot of the stories and the stats that we're going to talk about come directly from those folks. So really cool stuff. So I mentioned what we do, backup disaster recovery. We're in our 13th year now. You might have seen us in the news. We just went public a couple weeks ago, which was exciting. For the entrepreneurs on the call, it's actually a really cool story. Our founder started the company when he was 22, started building these little devices by hand in his parents' basement. Fast forward to October, and we went public. So really one of those cool basement to billions dollar stories. So we are now a global company, 23 offices around the world, and we protect over 500 petabytes of data in our 9 data centers. So it's all private cloud, one of the largest private clouds in the world. We're not using any of those third-party clouds. But I like to take a quick step back because I'm kind of a history nerd. I went back when my traveling days, I was reading books about history and watching documentaries, and so my wife and friends all make fun of me. But I like to put things into context in terms of kind of a historical timeline. And if you look at any era of the human race, you go back to the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Renaissance, what these all have in common is there was some form of technological advancement that propelled the human race. Now the downside was in every one of these eras there were bad actors on the other side exploiting that same technology. Now if you were to fast forward 1,000 years from now, historians are going to clearly look back at the time we're living in as the digital transformation age, right? The data-driven age. And thank goodness we're in that age right now, right? I mean, how would the economy really have survived without the ability to work remote and collaborate remotely and all that? Fantastic. Again, though, the bad part of all this is there are bad actors on the other side exploiting these technologies. And so it's kind of a constant race against these criminals to stay ahead of them. And so we're going to get into some of those strategies now. And you could look at statistics kind of all day long, and they're scary statistics in terms of how often folks are getting attacked. And we've seen a huge uptick in ransomware attacks specifically during the pandemic. One of the reasons being, we see folks kind of letting their guard down. You tend to be more security conscious when you're sitting at a desk or in your cubicle as opposed to sitting in your kitchen or a home office. And the criminals know that, and they seize upon these immediately. And they're super opportunistic. We were seeing emails go out days after the pandemic really took hold that looked like they came from the CDC or the World Health Organization. Hey, click here for cases in your area. Click here for symptoms you should be looking out for. And everybody was clicking on them, and malware was being distributed all around the world. And so it's something that really needs to be top of mind. Now, I've been given ransomware specific presentations for about 5 years now. 5 years ago, I would do the presentation, look out into the audience, and you see a lot of folks looking at their phones, maybe a couple head nods, but it was something that to the small to medium-sized business community was, hey, this isn't going to happen to me. This is happening at the enterprise level, right? The Fortune 500 companies, the municipalities, and all the rest. As the years have gone on, more and more folks have been hit themselves. Maybe they have a client or a vendor who have been hit, or they're just reading the news and seeing all of the stories. And so now it is becoming top of mind. And you see the stories of the, the sensational ones, the city of Baltimore, the city of Atlanta, the hospitals, especially actually up in upstate New York have been hit. And you see those, and they're good stories because you can get actual numbers from them and see what the impact is to the business community. Now, the city of Baltimore was hit last year. They were asked for essentially $75,000 in Bitcoin, and they will always, almost always, ask for the money in Bitcoin because it's almost impossible to get tracked back to them. They're not going to ask for an ACH payment or a credit card that might be reversed. And so city of Baltimore says, no, government policy is we don't pay that. We have a huge IT team where the city of Baltimore, we're going to restore all of our data and get back up and running. Well, after all of that occurred, after months and months of restoring their data, the actual impact to the city of Baltimore was about $18 million. And this is the math that the criminals want you to do. And this is scalable to whether you're a one-man nonprofit or the city of Baltimore. They're going to put that price point of, hey, pay me $75,000. Or if you don't want to, fine, go ahead and restore your data and come call me after $18 million worth of costs to try to restore that data. Now, the government has been saying really for years that you shouldn't pay the ransom for several different reasons. It puts a bigger bullseye on your back. You're emboldening these criminals. But they actually finally put out a formal statement on October 1st of this year. And this came from the Department of the Treasury. And what this said was, if you do pay the ransom, you're at risk of violating regulations, violating the law, essentially. The reason for this is a lot of times the folks behind these attacks are terrorist organizations. They're enemy nation states. So by paying that ransom, you run the risk of actually funding a terrorist organization, which is clearly a felony. There's not a lot of teeth to this yet. There's not a lot of ways that they can actually prosecute you for this because it's hard to track, but it shows you the direction that the government is going in. So you're starting to see the option of paying the ransom kind of getting taken off the table. So what happens? Okay, the city of Baltimore restores, they're back up and running. Well, Thanksgiving of this year, they got hit again. This time it was their school district, and the school district was shut down because what happened was, yes, they remediated that immediate problem, but they didn't put the security measures in place to make sure it didn't happen again. And it goes back to kind of the old bully in the cafeteria story, right? Where you pay your lunch money once, they're going to keep coming after you. If they can find out that they can get through to you, and especially if you pay, they're going to keep attacking you until they find that they can't get through anymore. So it's one of the reasons why it's not the option of, hey, let's just sweep this under the rug, pay the ransom, really is taken off the table at this point. And when you look at who's behind them, this is very important as well, because it's not the guy in his basement anymore who's doing these attacks who doesn't have to get a real job. There's corporate structure around what they're doing. There are ransomware developers out there that their job is just to create these forms of ransomware or other malware viruses. And then they basically sell that off to what I would call kind of the sales team. And these are the folks that are actually doing the attacks. And then even there's another layer below that, surprisingly enough, is almost like I would consider a tech support team that will pop up and say, oh, you don't have a Bitcoin account? Well, let me walk you right through how to set that up so we can get this payment going, you can get your data back. So it truly is a corporate structure. There are places on earth right now where folks are waking up, they're going to the office, they punch a time card, they sit all day at their computer, do all of these attacks, they punch out at the end of the day, go home, have dinner with their families, just like anybody with a regular job. And this is really, it's a multi-billion-dollar economy right now. We are seeing organized crime shift to this. It's no longer the Sopranos and Goodfellas and all the rest. They're making their money through cyber attacks, which kind of surprises people. But we're seeing that in organized crime here in the States, in Europe, Asia, all throughout the world, because there's so much money to be made with so little risk of getting caught. And then I mentioned those nation states. Again, I've sat on some panels with these folks from the FBI, and they will say we could put all the sanctions in the world on these guys, but they're going to find ways to make money. And this is one of the ways they do it, because they know they can make a lot of money with very little risk of getting caught. And another scary piece of this is a lot of times they're doing these attacks just to disrupt our economy, just to disrupt our society. And so, there's some very nefarious folks behind all this stuff. Now, we at Datto have done a ransomware specific report specifically for the SMB space for the last 4 years. And it's really the largest of its kind that's focusing directly on small to medium-sized businesses to try to get our own data as to what these attacks are looking like. And year after year, we've seen essentially the same way of them getting through. They're getting through those phishing emails. But the real aftermath of this really is not necessarily the data loss. It's the loss of productivity. It's the downtime that these businesses have to incur in order to get their data back. This is really the leverage that these criminals have, knowing that if you don't pay, chances are you're going to incur a lot more expenses on that downtime and the time that it's going to take you to recover than whatever that ransom payment is. And that shows up in this report year after year. I could remember 2018 presenting these findings and saying, look, the average payment's only $4,300 to the small business community, not enough to break the bank, but look at the cost of downtime. It's 10 times higher, right? $46,000. It's a number that jumps off the screen. Well, look at where that's gone. It's gone now. I mean, the ransom payment has been relatively stagnant, but the impact is now up over $270,000 per attack. How many businesses can survive that? I did a presentation with a gentleman from the CISA, from the Department of Homeland Security, and they're very strict about not sharing their slide decks, or you don't take pictures of their slides for whatever reason, but he said it publicly, so I don't mind sharing it. Their numbers show that the average ransomware attack causes 16.2 days of downtime. So now start putting that in perspective of what that looks like. And we could sit through here and talk acronyms for days, but the two that are really important to this conversation are your RPO and your RTO. Your RPO is the easier one to answer. That's your recovery point objective. How much data are you at risk of losing at any given time? Is it you're backing up daily? You're saying, okay, it's okay if I lose a day's worth of data. Maybe it's hourly. Most companies feel relatively comfortable about that because most businesses I talk to are backing up their data in some form or fashion, right? The only caveat is if you're not testing those backups, you really can't answer that question. But if this was really the only piece of leverage that these criminals had, they wouldn't get a lot of money out of this, right? If they just encrypt your data and say, hey, you got to pay us the money to get it back, and you have the ability to go restore that, then what kind of leverage they have really relies on that right-hand side of the screen, your recovery time objective. Okay, you're backing up your data. How long would it take you to get all that data back into a production environment? This is what makes up that $270,000 number. This is what makes up that $18 million number that we saw with the city of Baltimore. This is the conversation that needs to be had. How long would it take you to recover? And then trying to put a dollar value on that in terms of lost revenue, in terms of potentially losing clients, the impact to your reputation, all of these type of things. Only about a quarter of these attacks on the small to mid-sized business community are being reported to authorities. Two reasons. One, if it's a $5,900 ransomware attack, the FBI doesn't have the bandwidth to go look into every single $5,000 attack. So they want you to report it, but at the end of the day, businesses know if I report this, nothing's going to come of it. They're not going to catch these guys or get my data back. But the other reason, and the main reason people don't pay, is because of the impact to their reputation. Folks don't want to be known as the business in their area that's been attacked, the business in their industry that's been attacked. Word spreads quickly. They don't want that splashed in the local papers, and so they try to sweep it under the rug and handle it in-house. And that's another reason why so many people pay. But there are ways that we can protect ourselves, ways that the business community can protect our data and our productivity. First and foremost is understanding that you are under attack right now. Folks ask me all the time, what are the chances I get attacked? You couldn't ask me an easier question. The answer is 100%. You're being attacked right now. It's a matter of whether these viruses are getting through, and a matter of whether your folks are clicking on these phishing emails and all the rest. Within that report, to me, the scariest number wasn't the $270,000 number. To me, the scariest number was this. We talked to the managed services community, so folks like ICS, and over 90% felt that businesses should be highly concerned about ransomware. We talked to the small business owners. That number was 30%. 7 in 10 business owners that we talked to were not highly concerned about these attacks, despite it being a multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry, despite it being something that is putting companies out of business. FEMA put out a stat last year that said that 60% of small businesses that were down for a week or more never reopened their doors. Now they're talking about fires and floods and hurricanes and all the rest, but downtime is downtime. And so understanding that is critical. The criminals love that stat, that 7 in 10 businesses aren't making the commitment to protecting their business and protecting their data. Now, the easiest thing you could do, and one of these things that most businesses don't do, is putting policies and procedures in place. This sounds simple, but everybody needs to do this. And a lot of folks that maybe do have a policy and different procedures and protocols in place, put those together 5 years ago, haven't updated them, or they haven't been reviewing them regularly with their employees. And so this needs to be addressed, and it needs to be a living document that can be reviewed and updated as the environment changes. And it needs to be really something that is top of mind with the entire company. People need to know hey, if I get a scary red screen that says I just accidentally clicked on an email and infected my network with ransomware, what that next step needs to be. Before I came to Datto, if I got one of those scary red screens, I don't think my first reaction would be to stand up and walk down the hall and tell my boss, hey, I think I was on the wrong website here and I just infected us. I'm going to try to remediate it myself, or I'm going to call a buddy who might know a lot about computers and say, hey, can you help me out here? That's the worst thing you can do, because now that virus is migrating to any sort of server or database that you have access to. So these need to be documented. This is really a place that you need to contact folks like ICS to come in there and review these policies, get that second set of eyes. I actually also encourage you putting an internal task force together, call it whatever you want, but get buy-in from different departments, because A, you're going to find some things that you might not have thought of, but also, again, it creates that culture of security because there's buy-in throughout the organization. This is critical. That needs to happen, and there's regulatory reasons for that as well. You know, we're seeing the regulations really pick up throughout the country, really throughout the world, but in the States, it's more of a state-by-state, industry-by-industry type regulatory compliance issues. And what this will mean is, okay, you get attacked, awful, right? You got to try to remediate this problem. Maybe you have that downtime. You finally recover, you're back up and running, and you get a knock on your door, and they're going to say, hey, show me your policies and procedures. Show me that you did your due diligence to protect your data, your client's data, your employee data. Because if not, hey, there's going to be some fines on the back end of this as well. This also comes into play when you're talking about cybersecurity insurance. Show them these policies and procedures. Show them your disaster recovery plan. They're underwriters. They're going to look at lower risk or higher risk. It's like a smoker and a non-smoker. If you can show that you have these in place, that's a conversation you could have with these underwriters to show that, hey, I'm better off than a lot of other folks because I have these in place. Now, ongoing training is something, again, that's simple, it's inexpensive, but a lot of times you might do a training as an onboarding piece or maybe annually, but if it's not ongoing, it doesn't remain top of mind. Folks will listen to this webinar and hopefully go back and say, okay, I got to protect my data and all the rest, and that's great, but it's human nature. 2 weeks from now, it'll be out of sight, out of mind. At Datto, we have ongoing training. We'll get these fake phishing emails that look really good. They look like they're coming internally. Hey, Mike, I need you to fill out this document right away. I'm super paranoid, so I'll go through our database and say, hey, this person doesn't work here, forward it off to our security team, and they'll say, hey, congratulations, Michael. You listen to everything that we say. You know, you did everything we said, good job. Now, if I did click on one of those executable files, I will also get a congratulatory bounce back. Just congratulations, Michael, you just enrolled yourself in an hour-long cybersecurity training because clearly you haven't been listening to us. You start doing these type of training sessions, you will see the amount of clicks drop dramatically because now it's something that people are really keeping their eyes on. Now, password management is critical as well. 5 years ago, most common password 1234, as laughable as it sounds. You fast forward to today, a lot of times it's pretty similar. Maybe you threw an exclamation point in instead of the one. Things like that don't slow these criminals down at all. They're running programs that are just cracking all these codes. I saw a spreadsheet in a recent presentation, actually with a company that does this password management, and they showed that a 8-digit password, all letters can be cracked within under a second. You start throwing in uppercase, lowercase, you know, numbers, symbols with an 8-digit password, that now increases to maybe 30 seconds. You now spread that out to a 16-digit password with a combination of uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols. That now becomes 70 years. And so I know it's frustrating, the password piece of this, but it needs to, again, be top of mind. But to me, more important is the multi-factor authentication. When I sit down at my desk every morning, I go to log in, I will get a push notification to my cell phone. I accept it, it does a facial recognition, and then I'm on working, you know, as normal. A lot of folks don't do this, even though a lot of the business software that you've put in place have it built in. You just have to turn it on. This, I think, will eventually become the law of the land because it is such a strong way to protect your environment. And it amazes me how many people don't do it. I helped put together a budget for a local school board down here in Connecticut, and we were looking at security, and I saw they don't use multi-factor authentication. This was pre-pandemic. I said, you have to do this. It's not expensive. Just put this into the budget. And so they did, and then I talked to them maybe about a month and a half ago, and I just you know, regular call, and I said, well, how's that going? And they said, well, we didn't implement it. It was, you know, we didn't want to put it more on these teachers that now have to learn how to remote teach and all this stuff. And it was just mind-boggling to me that now they're so susceptible, even though they have so much more data now. So it's something you need to have that conversation on. Something as simple as not leaving devices unattended is critical. I used to be on the road all the time. Starbucks was my second office. I was amazed. I mean, almost every day I would see folks leave their laptops open and go get a cup of coffee, or worse, go outside and make a phone call or go to the restroom. When you're in a public space and a public Wi-Fi, it's just crazy. Now that you're potentially working remotely, I have a 7 and a 9-year-old. They love Minecraft. They love, Fortnite. So if I leave this device open, they might go Google search some things and go down a rabbit hole, and not intentionally maliciously, but might infect my network. I don't leave this unattended at all. I don't leave it unlocked at all. It's something you really need to keep top of mind, and that goes right into being careful what you click on. Again, I mentioned earlier, a lot of times your guard is let down if you're working in a different space. Be really vigilant about what you're clicking on. It's extremely important. Same goes for malware protection, those types of things. Now, everybody should have this in place, but it really does need to be part of a multi-layered approach. When you think about security, it's not just a product you buy off the shelf and say, okay, now I'm secure. It really needs to be something that is constantly reviewed, constantly integrates with different systems that you have, and again, is part of a larger kind of culture of security that you have. Now, backups play a key component in all of this, obviously. And data lives in a lot of different places. And again, the downtime is really what you need to focus on, because luckily backups have evolved. They have evolved just like all the rest of the technology that we've been talking about. And that's a good thing, because the evolution really is to help try to prevent that downtime. And so what it's really evolved to is from the traditional backup to business continuity. And this really looks at backups in a much different way. First and foremost, you have the hybrid approach to this. So you want to have on-premise backup, of course, but you want to have geo-redundancy as well. You want to have multiple copies of your data in different geographical locations. A lot of businesses I talk to have one form of backup and it's sitting in their office, a lot of times unlocked, just sitting there that anyone can go walk in. I do a lot of office visits and things like that, and I see it all the time. So you want to have a hybrid approach to that. Data, we've got 9 data centers around the world, but we have 2 here in the States. We want to keep data in the country it originates in. Ours are simple. They're in Pennsylvania and Utah. The real reasons for that, they're on opposite sides of the country. You want to make sure, regardless of what kind of technology you have, assume that it fails. What happens next? Server fails. Okay, I've got an on-premise backup. It's right there. All right, let's think of a doomsday scenario where your office is completely wiped out and that on-premise backup is compromised as well. Okay, well, I've got another copy of my data in Pennsylvania. Let's go down the real doomsday, and whatever's impacting your business is impacting that data center. Okay, I've got a third copy of my data encrypted, safe on the other side of the country. So you want to have that geo-redundancy of on-premise backup as well as that off-site sync. You also want to make it automated. I don't know if you caught or up front on that slide with some of those statistics, 91% of data loss and downtime comes from user error. So is somebody specifically responsible for these backups, for taking these backups, for monitoring these backups? When you're talking about that RPO goal, you say, okay, I need to back up hourly. You want those backups to happen automatically. You set that schedule, and you don't just think about, okay, they're happening automatically. They all need to be tested automatically, both locally and to make sure that that sync occurred off-site. This is extremely critical. And maybe you get a scary X here, and they're not all pretty green dots. Well, at least now, folks like ICS can go in and proactively address that, figure out what happened there. Maybe it's a false negative, but now you're not finding out that there was a backup failure when disaster strikes, and now that star, that RPO star, has jumped from 1 hour to 3 weeks. So this is all extremely critical, but the way that the backups are taken is vastly different as well. Traditional kind of commoditized backups are backing up files and folders, and they typically do a good job of this, right? Here's the file, here's the folder, back these up. What business continuity does is it takes a full image of that device, that server, that critical workstation. So it is capturing every file and folder that lives on that device, but it also captures the operating system, the applications, everything that lives on there is mirrored over to that on-premise device and then subsequently replicated off. And it gives us the ability to do a couple things. Once you have that base image, you're going to set that schedule, that RPO schedule that we looked at, maybe it's hourly. And what it's doing is it's just taking backups of the block level incremental changes that are occurring. So essentially the changes that are occurring between those 2 backup points. What this allows us to do is create what's called an inverse chain, whereas traditional backup tends to be layered upon previous backups. These are all independent of one another. So if you are hit with ransomware and you say, okay, what do I do next? Every one of these backup points are now independent of one another. So you could take that time machine and say, okay, I'm going back to 10 o'clock in the morning, and I know that that backup is clean. It also gives us the ability to do what's called ransomware detection. Because all of these backups are being monitored, they're all going along pretty much the same data set changes, right? Then all of a sudden ransomware occurs and everything is now encrypted. It's going to jump off the screen. It's going to all of a sudden every single file and folder has changed because they've been encrypted. An alert is going to go out and say, hey, we're not detecting individual variants because that's very hard to do. There's millions of them out there, but we know what the footprint of these ransomware attacks look like. This looks a lot like ransomware. And so an alert will go out, hey, this backup looks to be encrypted. Here is your last clean backup that you can now restore from. That's critical, but it also gives us the ability to virtualize. This is really what business continuity means. All right, so we've got the base image, we've got everything that lives on that in that environment. So somebody in your organization gets that scary red screen, hey, pay me some money in Bitcoin, all right? All right, well, since everything lived on that on-premise device, you would make a call over to ICS, and they would spin up what's called a virtual machine. They can do it directly from that on-premise device. So your first step is not to say, oh, I got to go restore my data. No, your first step is we need to get back up and running. We need to get our systems back up. We want to get back to production. This allows you to do that. This is a true production environment. Most folks within the office, if it's happening locally, don't even know that this failover had occurred. This is going to operate, look and feel just like your server. You could take active backups when you're in this state. You could be in this state for several hours, several days, several weeks, while there's forensics being done on that encrypted server, or it's being wiped clean or being replaced. And when you're ready to get that data back, you're not back to where you were when that scary red screen popped up, but instead back to where you were when you're ready to restore. And you could actually start that restoration process while you're still in that virtualized state. So what we're looking here to do is reduce that downtime. That $274,000 number needs to be reduced, because if you're able to reduce that to minutes or hours, you now have taken away that second piece of leverage that those criminals have. There's no reason to pay because, A, you know you're going to get your data back, but also you know that you can keep your business up and running while that's all being addressed. You're going to be able to answer those RPO and RTO questions at a minimum. Try to go back and answer those questions right now, or bring in ICS to do an evaluation, do a gap analysis or a network assessment to say, okay, here's what you have. Maybe what you have is aggressive enough and your RPO and your RTO goals are met. That's fantastic. At least getting a second set of eyes on that, it gives you that peace of mind. But with this, not only are the backups being tested, every single night these virtualization capabilities are being tested as well. It is being spun up in the background all the way up to a boot screen, so you know that that backup is bootable. Snapshot is taken with the timestamp that says that this has been tested as well, so that you know when you come into work on Monday morning, even if you are hit with ransomware, these have all been tested, so you know that you can virtualize. Again, it also allows you to look at that ransomware detection, so that you know you're being alerted with that. That's happening automatically all the time with every backup, and you have the ability to do all these cool virtualizations either locally or from either one of those data centers. I mean, it felt like hurricane season was never going to end down in the Southeast, but there were thousands of businesses that were operating out of our data centers while their server rooms were being drained out, new racks were being put in. How many of those businesses would be falling victim to that 60% number that FEMA put out? So, these virtualization capabilities really are the tools that can help prevent you from being impacted. Now, data also lives in a lot of different places now, the kind of data sprawl. It used to be super simple. Everything lived on an on-premise, Windows-based server. You back it up and you're good to go. Now, and it's really been accelerated over the last 3 months, businesses do business in a lot of different ways. They collaborate online. There, a lot of conferences. I sit in front of Zoom all day long or Microsoft Teams. How do you respond to this new landscape that we live in, this kind of work from anywhere environment? We've seen a huge boom in things like Microsoft Teams throughout the last several months, Zoom, all the rest. And again, these tools are great, but you have to understand that there's critical business data that lives on these as well. And yes, the majority of these ransomware attacks occur at the on-premise Windows-based level. That's just because the majority of data still lives there. It doesn't mean that the data that lives in Microsoft 365 is not vulnerable to these attacks. We found within that ransomware attack, over 60% within that report show that there were attacks within Microsoft 365. We're seeing it in Dropbox, we're seeing it in G Suite. The criminals, again, they're really smart, they're really opportunistic. They're gonna follow the data wherever it lives. we are seeing those attacks. So it's, again, that false sense of security that a lot of businesses have of, hey, I moved to Microsoft 365, it's Microsoft, I'm safe. You know, what these criminals are relying upon is not that they're going to be able to crack into Microsoft's cloud, but instead they're going to find somebody that's going to open the door to that data by clicking on a phishing email. And so, again, you have to understand what Microsoft and G Suite have. It's what's called the shared responsibility model, which means they will guarantee the integrity of their cloud, but the data that lives within it, your data, is your responsibility of the tenant. I did a presentation up in the Burlington, Massachusetts office of Microsoft, sat alongside one of their senior cloud engineers, and she openly said it to a group of 300 people. We have the shared responsibility model. You do bear some responsibility here. You go open their user agreement. You go to their forums. They will tell you flat out they don't have liability for those deletions or somebody, you know, inadvertently clicking on one of these things. G Suite, essentially the same verbiage. You're going to see the same exact thing. There is variants out there called Ransom Cloud. I'll give you a little Google homework assignment. Go Google a gentleman by the name of Kevin Mitnick. At one point, it's on the FBI's most wanted list, one of the most notorious hackers in the world back in the 90s. He was caught. He went to jail. He came out, kind of like the movie Catch You If You Can. He started working with the good guys, and he now creates viruses to show some of the vulnerabilities. We hired him to come to our annual conference back in 2019. He stood on stage in front of 3,000 managed service providers, had 2 laptops up, and he showed a live virus that he created. This isn't some theoretical, this is what could happen. This is a virus that he created that if he wanted to go back to his criminal ways, he could have implemented. And it was really good. You look at this email, it looks pretty legit, especially in the world we live in now. Everybody's getting a little bit more paranoid. They go through training. Okay, I got to update my anti-spam. Makes sense, right? All you got to do is click here, except when you click on this accept button, you've now encrypted every single email within your email box. And oh, by the way, if you had admin access, you have the risk of that entire domain being encrypted. And there's one email that's not encrypted that you can open, and that's that pretty red screen from Kevin saying, hey, pay me some money in Bitcoin and I'll encrypt all this stuff for you. We are seeing this, and there's an uptick in this. So you really have to understand that backups need to be happening at any stage of critical business data. You need to take an inventory of where all that data lives. You need, within those policies and procedures, there should be a mobile device policy as well. That needs to be part of that. There are attacks going on there. There's critical business data. And I think, you know, kind of the fluffy piece of this is you do have to understand the human element. You have to understand the different environments that people are living in right now. People think of, you know, people like me, I got 2 kids doing remote learning. It must be chaotic, and it is. But there's chaos with everybody's environment. Does everybody in your organization have the tools that they need to stay productive and in context of this conversation, stay protected? A lot of folks won't speak up. They don't want to be the squeaky wheel. They don't want to say, hey, I need this because, hey, we're seeing job losses. They don't want to be part of that. So you have to take this inventory and say, okay, where do all my physical devices live? And then where does all this critical data live? And is it being backed up? How many different software applications do we have out there that aren't being monitored by anybody? Just a department went and purchased it and nobody's really monitoring that. That's where that policy comes into play. And it's really critical. And so what I'll leave you with, though, is some good news. I mean, I do feel like we are heading in the right direction here. As we move forward, I think we're seeing more and more folks attend these webinars. I've seen an uptick in these webinars, which is great. I think a lot of folks are starting to understand some of these threats. This has been recorded. And so if you want to, get a copy of this, you can, and share it with folks within your organization. I think that's extremely critical here. I'll leave you with some contact information of how you can get more information. At a minimum, like I said, get an assessment done, have a conversation to see what you have. It's critical, and now is the time to do it. The importance of moving forward is nobody's got the silver bullet of what the economy is going to look like in 6 months, but agility is the key. The ability to say, it doesn't matter where I'm physically working or what's happening around me. I know that myself, my team can stay up and productive. And ICS is actually putting together a promotion for the folks that did join this webinar, 50% off all data equipment, which is a great offer to go take a look at. Just send an email over to info@icsnewyork.com with the hashtag Dado50 and have that conversation. Start that conversation now because this is the time that criminals are really starting to seize upon this, what they see as low-hanging fruit. You want to be ahead of that curve and ahead of some of the regulations that are coming up because when they come quickly. And it is, hey, put all these in place in the next 6 months, or you're not in compliance. And so now is the time to do that. So with that, there is a chat box. We've got a lot of folks on this webinar, so I don't know if we'll be able to get to all the questions. But in the meantime, Kevin, if you're still there, do you want to maybe give some parting thoughts here or some other ideas that you might have?
No, I mean, great information. I can tell you, as a business owner that supports 500 plus businesses, I sleep better at night knowing that Datto is at 95% of my customers' networks, right? So it's a true partnership. This is not, it's a layered approach. It's not just Datto and you're done. But I would encourage just to take in what Michael was saying and reach out and start the conversation just to learn more about what layers you have or don't have and see where we can help you.
Yeah, and one of the questions that came in, which I think does apply to what we're talking about, was does Norton or any of these other antivirus programs actually help against these things? And I would say to some extent, yes. I mean, but the thing about it is, I go to a lot of industry events, and there are so many new security vendors out there that I didn't even see last year. Really good security vendors, and some of these folks are employees that came straight out of the Department of Homeland Security and things like that. The key to this is if it's free, there's a reason why it's free. If it's something you buy off the shelf, there's a reason why it can be bought off the shelf. These are conversations that you should be having with Kevin and his team, because they're vetting these vendors every day, so they know what is working and what's not, and more importantly, how it integrates into that multi-layered approach that Kevin mentioned. And so I won't come on and recommend any specific product out there, because they all have their pros and cons, but I think that is one of the things that a lot of companies struggle with, is trying to vet all of these vendors. And they all say they can protect against everything. I will say that it's critical to talk to a consultant like Kevin and his team to go in and say what your specific environment is, what needs to be done, because there is not an off-the-shelf multi-layered approach. They all need to be customized to your business. Everyone listening in's got a different environment. That's where that consultative piece comes in. So great question. We have a lot of these questions coming in. One of them was, who am I emailing to get that quote? I think, Kevin, the best way to start would just be info@, right? icsnewyork.com, or is there another place if somebody really wants to get something going right now?
Yep, I think Sam will respond to each person's chat with where they should reach out. But yeah, info@icsnewyork.com is a great way to start.
Perfect. All right. Well, again, like I mentioned, this has been recorded. I really appreciate everyone's time here. Hopefully it was, kind of eye-opening and gets at least your mind thinking a little bit about what you need to do in 2021. I want to thank Kevin and ICS for including us in this. I think it's a very important topic. So thank you all very much. Stay safe, and hopefully you'll follow up soon with the folks over at ICS.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate your time.
All right, thanks. Bye.